Hello and welcome to LoreDive, where we look into and analyze the stories behind all of our favorite video games. Today we are going back into Friday the 13th and explaining the aspects of the main game mode and how to play the various counselors in the game successfully. This will include explaining the various objectives in the game, the way that counselors' stats work, and we'll take a look at the various counselors that you can play in the game. If it wasn't obvious, your main job as a counselor is to escape Jason, or kill him, though killing him is a lot harder than simply escaping. As a counselor, you'll be able to move around the map to search for items needed to repair the various objectives, as well as items to help you survive the onslaught from Jason. Counselors are generally faster than most versions of Jason when jogging or running, though this can vary from counselor to counselor. When pausing the game, you'll be able to bring up a list of different objectives for the map you're on, which will also show you which ones have been completed and which ones are yet to be done. The only thing that's not included are the steps required to kill Jason. When wandering around the area, you can search various drawers that are in the different cabins on the map. These drawers can contain maps of the area, allowing you to see where everyone is, as well as any important items that have been dropped, walkie-talkies, which can keep you in contact with other survivors no matter how far away you are. Pocket knives will allow you to free yourself if Jason has grabbed you, as well as disable his traps. First aid sprays will heal you if you get injured. There is the fuse, an important item that always spawns somewhere in the game and is required to repair the phone. Car keys, which are required to start one of the two possible cars on the map. And then you can find either Pamela Voorhees or Tommy Jarvis tapes, which just give a bit more backstory into both characters. Unfortunately, for the most part, the drawers are going to be empty. The first, and usually easiest objective to meet as a counselor is actually more of a side objective. This can be done by looking for the cabin with a radio tower above it. Once there, you'll be able to find a radio inside of the house. Using it will contact Tommy, who will show up after two survivors have either been killed, escaped, or a mix of the two. The other objectives in the game are going to be your main objectives. These will be a bit harder to complete as you will almost always have Jason hanging around at least one of them. This can be a particular problem if two objectives are a little too close to each other, allowing him to patrol back and forth between both of them. These objectives are to call the police, escape in the car, or escape in the boat. There's always a house or a cabin with a phone, and at least one four-door car somewhere on the premises. There can also be a second two-door car, but this is sometimes replaced by a boat. In order to call the police, you will first need to find the fuse for the phone box, which has been hidden somewhere in the many drawers on the map. Once found, you can make your way to the phone box and install it. How long it will take and how difficult it will be to install will change depending on the counselor. It is also worth noting that the Jason player will almost always place one or two traps at the phone box, as it actively prevents players from accessing it without notifying Jason. Traps can only be disarmed in one of two ways, either by sticking a pocket knife into it to disarm it, or by voluntarily stepping into it to get it out of the way. Either way, Jason will hear an audible sound whenever a trap goes off, so be wary as he may teleport back. This can also be extremely annoying if the Jason player in question has a plethora of traps to put down, like Part 2 Jason, as it can make trying to get to the fuse box to get it taken care of a futile endeavor. In these cases, if you're the survivor at the phone box, you may as well just try to keep Jason there as long as you can, while your teammates work on other objectives, since as long as he's focused on you, he can't stop them. In order to start the car, you're going to need gasoline to fill it up, and a battery to install in it. This should almost always be done by a repair-oriented character. But sometimes, a Chad's gotta do what a Chad's gotta do. How difficult doing either of these things will be is determined by which character you are playing. And it may be my imagination, but it seems like certain characters find certain tasks easier than others. For instance, it seems like Tiffany gets fewer skill checks when trying to install the battery than when pouring gas in the car. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my opinion, because I'm fairly certain that installing a battery in the car is harder than filling it up with gas. If the car has been started, that doesn't necessarily mean you're home free, as the car can stall out if the driver hits an object or Jason, which will cause the car to take a moment to be started again. If Jason gets to any of the doors on the car while it's stationary, he'll easily be able to pull someone out. So if the car is stalled while Jason is nearby, it's usually just better to run until it's safe to go back for it. As mentioned before, two cars can appear on the map, a 4-seater and a 2-seater. The 4-seater always spawns no matter what, but the 2-seater can sometimes be replaced by the boat, as mentioned. If two cars spawn, that means that there will always be two batteries, 2 cans of gas, and 2 keys somewhere on the map. All of these parts are interchangeable, meaning that you can put any piece into any car. So it's usually a better idea to simply use the item on the vehicle that's closest to you, as otherwise you'll most likely have to trek halfway across the map. If for some reason you see a necessary item, but don't want to take it with you, it's still a good idea for you to pick it up and then set it back down again. Doing this will highlight it on the map, allowing anybody who wishes to obtain it to find it. In situations where the second car doesn't appear on the map, it will be replaced by the boat. The boat acts similar in nature to the 2-seater car, as it can only hold 2 people. Repairing it is a little different, as it doesn't require a battery, but instead requires a propeller, which sometimes feels like the hardest thing to find in the game. It's usually a little easier to get it started once the parts are in place, as it's virtually impossible for Jason to trap it efficiently. It is, however, a bit more dangerous than the car though, since if Jason catches you while trying to escape in the boat, he can easily tip it over. From here, trying to get the boat started again is usually useless, as there is no way to do so before Jason can simply tip it over again. You can try to swim to shore, but Jason will most likely catch up to you before you can, and even if you do manage it, odds are you're going to be out of stamina, so he'll easily be able to grab you if he's focused. Basically what I'm saying is, if you get caught in the boat, you're probably screwed. The final, and usually hardest way to beat the game, is to kill Jason. This is possible, but not easily achieved if Jason is paying attention, or if you don't have enough players to get everything set up beforehand. The first thing that you'll need to do is knock Jason's mask off. The easiest item to do this with is the machete, and it's usually best if a player with high luck tries to make the attempt. So if you've got a Chad on your team, this is his time to shine. And don't worry, I'll go into stats and what they mean in just a little bit. Afterwards, a female counselor may want to pick up the mask. Usually I would recommend a faster counselor to do this, as in the future she's probably going to be focused on by Jason. After this counselor has the mask, she's going to want to find Jason's shack somewhere on the map. Once it's found, she, and only she, should enter the shack. There she'll find the head of Jason's mother, as well as her signature sweater. The sweater is what we've come here for. The only reason a female counselor is the one who should enter the shack is because she's the one who has the mask. If anyone else enters the shack without the mask, Jason will receive a psychic call from Pamela, telling him that intruders are trying to steal her. By donning the sweater, the counselor will now be given one opportunity, and only one opportunity, to stun Jason for a short duration. If the counselor is killed while wearing the sweater, she will not drop it, and there will not be a second chance to kill Jason. The next thing we will need is Tommy Jarvis. Tommy Jarvis will only appear after he's been called and 2 or more counselors have been killed, or have escaped. Once he makes his appearance, make sure that Tommy gets a hold of a machete or an axe, and you'll have everything that you need to kill Old Meathead. The counselor with the sweater and Tommy will need to meet up. Once they do so, the female counselor can pretend to be Jason's mother, just like Ginny did in part 2. This will cause Jason to fumble for a moment instead of striking her down. After this, someone will need to hit Jason, preferably with a baseball bat, in order to knock him to the ground. Once that is done, all that Tommy has to do is approach Jason, and he'll be given a prompt to finish him for good. Or at least until the next match. But now a question of yours may be, which counselor would I personally want to play as in the game? And to answer that, we'll need to look at what each of the counselors brings to the table by looking at their individual stats. Each counselor's stats are rated from 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. Composure determines how long it takes for a counselor to lose themselves to fear, and is one of the 2 stats that affects how long it takes for a counselor to break free from Jason if they are grabbed. Fear affects counselors in 4 stages. At stage 1, the counselor is at ease and they have no debuffs attached to them. At stage 2, the counselor will become visibly nervous and begin looking over their shoulder. This mainly acts as a way to show that the counselor is becoming afraid, but other than that, stage 2 doesn't really affect the counselor in any significant way. At stage 3, the counselor will suffer penalties such as stumbling when moving, and will scream if they see Jason. They will also begin talking to themselves if they know Jason is nearby. At stage 4, the counselor will begin to panic, causing the screen to darken and the HUD to disappear. The counselor's stamina regeneration is also reduced, making it easier for Jason to eventually wear them down before going in for the kill. Luck is one stat that isn't really easily understood, as there isn't anything that explains what it does. In short, luck affects all other skills in the game, but in various ways. The one that most people will find useful is its increased weapon durability, as luck decreases the likelihood that an item will break when using it. Your luck can also affect the opportunities to increase the amount of stamina you receive when breaking out of Jason's grab, as well as when you hit him with a weapon. High luck can also decrease the amount of time needed to start the car or the boat. The repair stat is pretty simple, as it affects how long it takes a counselor to fix an objective such as power boxes, the car, or the boat, as well as how many skill checks the player will receive when repairing. Counselors with a high repair stat will be able to get through these quickly, as they repair extremely fast and have huge hitboxes on their skill checks. Counselors with a lower repair stat will take longer, and will have multiple hitboxes that they will need to hit. It's often a good idea to avoid repairing items with a low repair character, since if you miss a skill check, a global sound will be made depending on what you are repairing, and if you're unlucky, it can lead Jason right to you. Speed is probably the easiest stat to understand, as it affects how fast the character moves while sprinting. The higher their speed stat, the faster they're going to move. And contrary to popular opinion, having a faster speed stat will not cause you to drain stamina faster. Speaking of, stamina is a resource that all counselors use to accomplish various actions. Jogging will slowly drain the stamina bar, while sprinting will drain it at a faster rate. When swimming, the counselor's stamina is always being depleted, but the counselor can swim at 2 different speeds. They will lose stamina less quickly if they are doing a breaststroke, which acts like jogging, and will use up more stamina if using a front stroke, which is closer to sprinting. Stealth primarily affects survivors' footfalls and reduces the amount of sound that they make in the game from Jason's point of view. What this means is that Jason is not going to be able to hear survivors with a higher stealth stat from far away, while characters with a lower stealth stat he may be able to hear from all the way across the map. Strength is actually quite unique, as having a high strength stat can be both good and bad. Strength affects how much damage is done when attacking Jason and the stun length when Jason is stunned. However, it doesn't increase the likelihood that Jason will be stunned, but does increase the likelihood that the item being used will break. So, while trying to stun Jason with a higher strength character can lead to a longer stun time, it might be better to use a weaker character so it's less likely that you'll have a broken item afterwards. Vanessa Jones, the athletic girl. A good starting counselor for someone playing the game for the first time. Vanessa has the highest speed in the game and very high stamina, meaning that you're not only going to be able to move extremely fast, but you'll be able to maintain your distance from Jason for a long period of time. On the flip side, she's also the noisiest character in the game, and will often be one of the first counselors that Jason is likely to find. She also isn't very good at repairing items, and generally she loses composure pretty fast. So keeping Jason at a distance is the best way to go. Generally the best way to use Vanessa is to have her as a distraction for the rest of the counselors, or to use her as a runner to take items where they need to go so other players can use them. She's an okay choice to try and obtain Pamela's sweater, though doing so without Jason's hockey mask is almost guaranteed that Jason will be trying to hunt you down for the rest of the game. I wasn't really able to find a direct character that she seemed to be based off of in any of the movies, as her design seems to largely be her own. Some have said that she may have been based off of Sissy Baker from Friday the 13th Part 6, but I don't really see much resemblance. Not much can be garnered off of her personality, as she's one of the least used characters in the puzzle segments in the game. I feel that though, at least in my point of view, she's a good unique character design that acts on her own without needing to be directly based off of someone else. Chad Kensington, the preppy guy. Chad is an interesting character, as while most characters fit a particular role in the game, Chad is more geared to fit into his trope instead. If you're trying to get things done with Chad, you're probably going to be disappointed, as most of his vital stats are fairly bad, with low repair, stamina, and strength. He also has the lowest composure in the game, meaning that he's going to be shitting his pants really quickly. Chad's defining characteristic is also his highest trait, his luck. This is kind of why he should only be used by players who are a bit more adept at the game, as even though he's one of the starting characters, you'll generally need to take advantage of his lucky breaks as they come up. Something that's going to be harder to do if you're not familiar with the game. A maxed luck stat means that a baseball bat in particular becomes a powerhouse weapon which can last several swings, even with its naturally low durability. Generally, the best way to play as Chad is to be opportunistic, defending those when you can, and trying to keep the other counselors alive when you have the ability to do so, but when the going gets tough, it's time to book it and let the others fend for themselves. Chad is kind of an amalgamation of a few characters, with his physical looks and attitude being somewhat similar to Trent from the Friday the 13th remake, while his preppy style is more borrowed from Russell from Part 7 and Rick from Part 3. In the moments where his personality tends to shine through, he is shown to be a bit standoffish and self-absorbed, though not directly antagonistic. Besides, he doesn't need to have a great personality when he's got other assets. It's also found that he's a bit of a mama's boy, though he would never admit it. Generally, if there's more than one Chad in the game, an argument will inevitably come up over which one is Chad and which one is Brad, since no one can ever really tell them apart. Kenny Riedell, the head counselor. Kenny doesn't fit any particular role in the game, as Kenny is a jack-of-all-trades character with completely average stats across the board. This sounds okay on paper, but in reality it means that he can't do anything with any sort of regularity. It does make him a decent backup character for certain aspects of the game, but you'll almost always have someone better suited for the situation. If, however, for instance, all of your repair characters have already died, then Kenny can be your man. He isn't particularly convincing as Pamela Voorhees though, so perhaps have a female counselor do that. Kenny's general looks is based off of one of the 4 Kickstarter backers who donated $10,000 to be put in the game as a counselor, so his face is modeled off of a real person out there. So congrats, dude! You've been killed over and over and over and over by the various Jasons out there. Besides his backer's look, he is most likely based off of Steve Christie from Friday the 13th Part 1, though he's probably not as seasoned as Steve is supposed to be. Sadly, there isn't much else to say about Kenny's personality since, as most of the characters in the game will show you, they don't really have much of one. Okay. I didn't expect that. Jenny Myers, the girl next door. Out of all of the characters in the game, Jenny's character's inspiration is probably the easiest to spot, looking very similar to Chris Higgins, the final girl in Friday the 13th Part 3. While she's considered to be the girl next door, she is definitely billed to be the final girl in the game, though the way the game works, that's usually not the case. Her highest stat is her composure, which means that she's going to be the least panicky of all of the base counselors. Her low strength when combined with her high luck actually does give her a bit of a benefit when it comes to a particular aspect of the game, and that is knocking Jason's mask off. Weapons that are likely to knock his mask off, the machete and the axe, generally break relatively easily with higher strength characters, but Jenny can whack away with little trouble, unless she's grabbed, that is. Despite her final girl status, it usually isn't a great idea to have her go for Pamela Sweater, as her low speed and average stamina means that she's likely to get caught if Jason focuses on her. Jenny also isn't going to be your repair character, as her repair is fairly lacking. Where Jenny shines the most is her ability to support others, often running interference and generally being a nuisance for Jason. Her high composure means that she can come in, mess with Jason for a short duration, and then bounce when things get hairy, hopefully distracting Jason long enough for objectives to get done. This may mean that unlike her archetype, Jenny probably won't be the final girl. But if Jenny dies to ensure that her friends live, then she's done her job. It doesn't mean that you can't escape with her, as she can of course escape with others in the right situations. But Jenny needs to get other players to do their jobs, while she keeps the big guy busy long enough for them all to escape alive. AJ Mason, the rocker chick. AJ is primarily based off of Violet from Friday the 13th Part 5, whose entire personality consisted of a black streak in her hair, mad dancing skills, and having a body that consists of cottage cheese. AJ's highest stat is her stealth, meaning that she's the best lone wolf type player in the game. She'll find it relatively easy to hide from Jason the majority of the time. This unfortunately does come with a caveat that if Jason finds her, she's gonna have a hard time getting away, as her low strength, speed, and stamina make her relatively easy to catch once found. When she is on her own though, she's great at repairing objectives that Jason isn't currently trying to protect. If Jason is at the car, AJ should be getting the boat ready. If he switched to the boat, then AJ should make her way back to the phone, etc, etc. The worst thing that could possibly happen to you with AJ is to have a Vanessa or a Bugsy hanging around, as both will give your position away really quickly. If Jason finds you, and he probably will find you, you can't escape as easily as them, so rest assured that you're going to be the first one going down. Since she also has the lowest luck in the game, she's also not going to be pulling surprises out of nowhere. Overall, AJ is a decent character with some great pluses as well as some pretty serious flaws that will work against her in some situations. Deborah Kim, the bookish girl. Based primarily off of Maddie from Part 7, and maybe a little bit of Ava from Part 8, Maddie is one of your 2 repair characters for the game. What this means is that it is essential for one of your team to keep you alive, at least until all of the repairs are done. So in order to do this, make sure you've got some protection when wandering around. If you start getting focused by Jason, then it's your friend's job to make sure you survive long enough to get the repairs done. The great thing about Deborah is that she can oftentimes fix an objective faster than Jason can stop her, if he's sufficiently distracted. If Deborah finds herself next to a trapped objective, then she should not be the one to take one for the team. As while she may be able to get an objective done before Jason can teleport in, she won't be able to do so if she's stuck in a trap. If Deborah is found by Jason, her high stealth will usually allow her to hide, at least temporarily, if she manages to get away, with her middle-of-the-road composure keeping her from panicking too quickly. Deborah's downsides are fairly obvious, having low speed and even lower stamina, making her relatively easy for Jason to catch up to. If the team has decided that they wish to kill Jason, then Deborah should not be the one to masquerade as Pamela unless there is no other option. The reason being is that she'll probably find herself caught before anyone has the opportunity to save her. If you're in a situation where you have to fight Jason, then a shotgun or a flare gun will be your weapon of choice, as Deborah's strength is non-existent and her luck isn't much better. Though Deborah's weaknesses are pretty big, she's one of the most valuable members of the team and one that you're going to want to keep alive as long as possible. Brandon Bugsy Wilson, the Jock. As his overview states, Brandon Wilson is the strongest of all of the counselors, making him the character to go one-on-one with Jason in most situations. According to his bio, Brandon plays multiple of sports and maintains a high GPA as well. While this is some interesting information, it doesn't completely jive with his stats, as while Bugsy is maxed out on his strength, his repair is abysmal, meaning that if you're relying on Bugsy to repair something, you're in trouble. Bugsy also has decent speed and stamina, meaning he can cut and run if things don't look like they're going his way. Due to this, Bugsy is arguably the best bodyguard in the game and can act as runner as well if needed. Be aware though, Bugsy's low luck means that while he's great with just about any weapon, you'll usually want him to be using a more durable weapon like the wrench or the pipe, as they're more likely to survive a bit longer in his hands, unlike the baseball bat, which has a tendency to break alarmingly quickly. Bugsy really doesn't have a direct one-to-one comparison to a character from the movies, except maybe Julius from Part 8, but even that would be somewhat of a stretch, as based on Bugsy's original design, yeah. The reason for Bugsy's drastic change in design is due to him also being based off of a Kickstarter backer. So there's a real Bugsy out there, somewhere. Eric J.R. LaChappa, the nerd. Most of what can be said about Deborah can also be said about Eric, though unlike Deborah, Eric doesn't have as high of a stealth stat, and his stamina and speed are a bit less than that of Deborah's. What Eric can do instead is stun Jason for a little bit longer with his slightly higher strength, though attempting this isn't really recommended. He also has a higher luck stat, which can lead to a few more lucky breaks for LaChappa, but this isn't going to be a reliable part of his kit. Generally, in my opinion, if you're going to be playing a repair character, Eric isn't quite as good as Deborah, but he isn't a bad choice by any means. Just more often than not, you're going to find Deborah is the more reliable character to use. As far as Eric's looks, he's the third of the 4 Kickstarter backers. Other than that, he doesn't have another character in the movies that he's based off of. At least, not directly. Adam Palomino, the edgy guy. Speaking of Kickstarter backers, our final character based off of one is going to be our man, Adam. If you aren't sure whether you want to be a technical character or a brawler, then Adam might be your choice. With high strength, composure, and average repair, he can fight off Jason or act as the technician for the group if needed. While his bio mentions him being a down-to-earth grease monkey who can fix a vehicle like no one else, he is drastically outshadowed in the technical department by Deborah, Eric, and AJ. So, despite him being a bit of a grease monkey, he's got some things that he needs to work on. Adam is fairly versatile, being able to work solo or with a group, protecting players from Jason if needed, but also going off on his own to take care of alternative objectives if the group is being focused on. Aside from his Kickstarter backer, Adam doesn't really have a close reference point, but of all the characters in the franchise, he's most likely based off of the 2 greasers from Friday Part 5. You know, the two that only exist to get immediately killed. Tiffany Cox, the flirty girl. Despite her looks, a good Tiffany takes advantage of careful planning. She has max stealth, meaning that Tiffany will not make noise while jogging. While her speed isn't quite at the levels of Vanessa, Chad, or Bugsy, she's still faster than the average counselor, which couples well with her high stamina. This will allow her to run Jason around for a while if he tries to focus her. Tiffany's main goal is to deliver parts she finds to their corresponding locations. This is due to her high athleticism as well as her terrible repair stat, which makes her inadequate for fixing objectives herself. Unlike other runners though, she can push an objective whether or not Jason is there, as her high stealth will allow her to get away quickly. Generally though, Tiffany should focus on lesser objectives in a match to avoid Jason's wrath while using stealth to avoid detection. Also, thanks to her speed and stealth, Tiffany is an ideal female counselor to wear Pamela's sweater, as even if she doesn't have the mask, she can bolt away while standing a decent chance of keeping away from Jason for a long period of time. If done early enough in the match, Jason may not be able to sense her if he cannot morph immediately to the shack, since Tiffany may have gained a considerable distance away. While she's very visibly based off of the twins, Tina and Terry, from Part 4, she actually has a bit of her own unique backstory. When she was a toddler, her mother passed away, and as her father was always busy, she felt very little love growing up, except from her dolls and her dog, Rufus. She had support from her classmates and took notice when more boys talked to her in later years. She has decided that she wants to be a social justice worker after she finishes college, but for now, she just enjoys spending time with the boys. Mitch Floyd, the stoner. Mitch's gameplay is centered around not being frightened easily and excelling at repairing objectives. His composure is the second highest in the game, only being beaten out by Jenny. Along with this, where he truly shines is his high repair stat. It's the second highest in the game, behind both Eric and Deborah. While he doesn't get frightened easily, he's definitely not a counselor made to fight. He possesses unimpressive strength and abysmally low luck. He's also lacking in speed and stamina, which will make it easy for him to fall into Jason's clutches if he's nearby. Due to his poor combat ability, if you're playing as Floyd, you should seek out firearms or weapons with a high stun chance. His appearance is heavily based on the character Charles, or Chuck Garth, in Friday the 13th Part 3, with a few minor tweaks. He is noticeably older than the rest of the counselors, making him stand out a bit when compared to them. And while I wouldn't consider him the best counselor that you could possibly choose, I would still say that playing as Chuck will allow you to contribute admirably to the rest of the team. Sheldon Finkelstein, the prankster. Sheldon has a unique mix of statistics. Sheldon possesses a high stealth stat and an above average strength. This actually makes Sheldon one of the best defenders for stealth characters in the game, as he can defend other counselors from Jason if he appears, while also not giving away their location. Giving Sheldon a pipe, wrench, or machete should help him keep Jason at bay, at least in the earlier parts of the game. Sheldon also possesses an above average composure, so he can keep his fear under control and lower his fear quicker than other counselors. If necessary, Sheldon also has an average repair stat, making repairs slightly faster than other defenders in the game. Where Sheldon lacks, however, is that he is not very athletic, so he can easily fall into Jason's clutches if he's not careful enough. Once Jason starts gaining on Sheldon, you should fight back at least for a little bit to try and knock him down. This should allow Sheldon to gain his breath and give him enough time to where he can sprint out of there to somewhere more safe. Sheldon is based off of the character of the same name from Friday the 13th Part 3, and is even voice acted by the same man who played him in that movie. While he unfortunately didn't survive Friday the 13th Part 3, anyone who decides to play him may give him a second chance. Fox, the biker. In the game, Fox has high strength. This makes her pretty much the only female character that can stun Jason for long periods of time. She also has decent composure and repair, making her okay at being the repair character if needed. Unlike most other repair characters though, she also has an average stamina, allowing her to flee from Jason, at least for a little while. But her below average speed means that she can't make it too far before she's going to need a rest. While Fox can don Pamela's sweater, it's usually not a good idea for her to do so, as while she can stay running for a long period of time, she generally can't stay out of Jason's sight long enough before he manages to catch up with her. Another one of the campers, based off of an actual character from the movie, Fox acts as a minor antagonist in the movie that she's in. Granted, she's also the least serious and more fun-loving of the trio of gang members that she's a part of. She unfortunately doesn't get much screen time in the movie, as she's only in a few scenes before she exits the film via pitchfork to the throat. Her voice actress is Gloria Charles, the same actress that played her in the film. This makes this game her last acting credit before she unfortunately passed away in late 2016. While I'm definitely late to the party here, I hope that I can offer my condolences and hope that Gloria is resting peacefully. Victoria Stirling, the Caddy Girl. Primarily based off the character Melissa Poir from Friday the 13th Part 7, Victoria acts somewhat like a female version of Chad, but her kit actually gives her a bit more reliability when it comes to getting things done. Her high luck and low strength actually makes Victoria a good choice for defending her teammates, as she can keep low durability weapons like the baseball bat from breaking often. And while she's not particularly fast, her high stamina allows her to run and jog longer durations before running out of stamina. Despite fitting a similar trope as Chad, Victoria doesn't really work well on her own. Luckily though, her relatively high stealth means that she isn't going to be giving away the group's location unless she's being reckless. It's usually a good idea to keep her around characters like Eric or Deborah, as Victoria can be pretty good at keeping them protected. Victoria is arguably also one of the best candidates to grab Pamela's sweater, as thanks to her stealth and stamina, she's more likely to be able to hide from Jason if he gets distracted, giving her enough time to possibly meet up with Tommy. Victoria is also somewhat interesting, as she's one of the few characters that gets a bit of backstory. Victoria tends to be somewhat of a bitch, remarking on other people's flaws and putting them down in general. This isn't done with malice though, as in her warped viewpoint, doing this will make them quote-unquote better people. Though the people that she rags on rarely agree with her. She tries to be a good leader, but can quickly crack when too much pressure is put on her. Her father is a dean at an Ivy League school, which I actually thought was kind of a fun fact. Particularly since I tend to run "my dad's a cop" on her, which from a lore perspective means that maybe one of her dads is actually her stepdad, or she happens to have two gay dads. So, neat trivia. Tommy Jarvis, the Hunter. Tommy is a unique counselor, and the strongest of them all. As mentioned previously, he will only show up if he's called using the radio. This will cause him to appear after two counselors have died or escaped. If either of these things has already happened, then he'll appear immediately. Tommy is based directly off of his character in the movies, specifically his role in Part 6. He is the most powerful survivor by far, with 10 stats all across the board. If you have anything that needs to be filled, Tommy can do that for you. Bow chicka bow wow. When he appears, he's going to have a pocket knife, a first aid spray, and a shotgun at the ready. While Tommy can certainly use the shotgun, it might actually be better for him to hand that off to somebody else so that he can arm himself with either the machete or the axe. Since, as mentioned, he's the only survivor that can land the final blow on Jason, since, apparently, nobody knows how a machete works. With that, we have every counselor in the game. Personally, I tend to be a little bit split in which characters I choose, often playing as either Deborah or Tiffany, but everybody has their own preference. The next video is going to be all about the different versions of Jason, which means it's probably going to be a little bit shorter than this video, simply because, though there's several different versions of him, in the end he's still Jason. Since there's only one or two more videos left of Friday the 13th, I'm going to go ahead and start getting ready for the next smaller series. I mentioned on my community tab that I was going to try and do a smaller, shorter RPG, but I wanted to check and see whether y'all would prefer to watch a full-on standard RPG, or a horror-based RPG, which there aren't actually all that many of. While the vote wasn't as overwhelming as the Friday the 13th request, it was quite apparent that y'all would prefer to see something horror-related. So, as promised, at the end of this video, I'm going to put up a preview of 3 possible games that I may look into. And later on in the day today, I'm going to put up a poll on my community tab, as well as on my Twitter, which I've linked in the description of this video. I'll consider the votes in both polls, and we'll see what comes next. If you have any other LoreDives that you might like to see, let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time.
Oh, death. Oh, death. Won't you spare me over till another year?